to the entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Hope everybody had a happy new year. And in this video series, I wanted to go over each of the New York Giants head coaching candidates, guys that they are bringing in for interviews. And I figured I would start with a lesser-known guy. Of course, everybody knows Josh McDaniels for the most part. Obviously, I'm going to, do a more in-depth look. But I wanted to go with a guy that maybe is not such a household name, even though Bienemy was interviewed by 3 or 4 teams last year to be the head coach of their football teams before being passed up for other candidates. The Green Bay Packers actually were very interested potentially in acquiring his services before deciding to go with Matt LaFleur. Some people point to the fact that he's a Rooney Rule candidate, but here's what I'll say about that. You only need to bring in one minority candidate. The Giants have now brought in 2, so I think there's significant interest in both him and Richard. They've already fulfilled that by bringing in Bienemy. They then set up an interview with Richard. Bienemy is an offensive-minded head coach. I've been on record of saying that I want a defensive-minded head coach because I thought he'd bring structure, things along that nature. But one thing I will say about Bienemy, and he's definitely had a successful career as a coach, and we're going to get into all of it, he definitely has attention to detail. I think that is probably his strongest suit, how diligent he is, and you're going to hear what former coaches have had to say about him in quotes, what Andy Reid has said about him as his coordinator. So that is one thing he definitely has going for him. That's his strongest factor. He's still relatively young. He's 50 years old. He's a former NFL player. He started at Colorado as a running back, where he was very good, and he was a second-round pick by the San Diego Chargers. He then spent 9 years in the league, and the reason he stuck around was because of his attention to detail. He was a special teams contributor, a third and short contributor. Was not a great NFL player, but he was able to stick around because of his hard work. Then shortly after that, he took a job with his alma mater at Colorado, naturally, as a running back coach. From 2001 to 2002, he then did the same for UCLA from 2003 to 2005. While at UCLA, he was in charge of coaching Maurice Jones-Drew, who of course turned out to be a phenomenal NFL running back. And then in the NFL, he shortly took a job with the Minnesota Vikings, and then of course with the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, with the Minnesota Vikings, Adrian Peterson was the running back coach. He was the running back coach, and he was the running back he was in charge of. And you guessed it, Adrian Peterson. We all know what he did during the stretch that he coached him. He led the NFC in rushing, I think, 2 or 3 times. And then with the Chiefs, of course, he coached some very good running backs in Jamal Charles and Kareem Hunt. So he's definitely had success in that department as a running back coach. But he has more of a resume than that. Like I said, he took on the running back coach with the Minnesota Vikings after his coaching at UCLA from 2006 to 2010. In 2010, he was promoted to assistant head coach of the offense. In December of 2010, Bienemy actually went back to college to take a promotion. He moved up in the ranks. He became an offensive coordinator to further build his resume. That's another thing I really like about this guy. I admire guys who are hard workers, and this guy has worked his tail off. He's been all around the league, and he slowly worked his way up the coaching ladder. 2010, he became the offensive coordinator with his alma mater, and then he came back to the NFL in 2013 with the Kansas City Chiefs to take on the same job he had with the Minnesota Vikings as a running back coach. And then, of course, we know all the success the Chiefs have had with the running backs. And, yeah, Andy Reid is a brilliant offensive mind, and I'm sure he has a lot to do with it. But Bienemy deserves some credit for that as well, with the usage of the running backs. And then in 2018, Bienemy was promoted to the offensive coordinator. And, of course, we all know what the Kansas City Chiefs offense did last year. Again, of course, Andy Reid. You got Patrick Mahomes. That certainly doesn't hurt. But, Kareem Hunt had a really good year. So he's had a lot of success as the offensive coordinator. Now, one thing that people point to is that he doesn't call the plays, and that is true. But I'm going to get into his exact role with some of the quotes I'm about to show you with the Kansas City Chiefs, because I was curious as to that. What is his exact role with the Kansas City Chiefs offense? And he does have a pretty important role. He doesn't call the plays, which is why people probably have passed up on him for coaching jobs in the past. But he's a guy with a lot of talent, and he works really hard. That's one thing I will certainly say about Bienemy. But let's jump into some of the quotes about what some former coaches and some former players have said about Bienemy. I got this from an ESPN article, and there's Bienemy, and here's the first quote I wanted to bring up to you guys. This was off the mouth of a former coach of his. He understood that his value to our team as a special teams guy, said Childress, who later, as head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, gave Bienemy his first NFL assistant job coaching Adrian Peterson and the running backs. I just have a picture of him coming out on the practice field because it takes older guys longer to warm up, a full hour before practice. And we started out right out with special teams, and he wanted to be able to go full tilt to start with. His level of detail when he prepared himself to play was incredible. So, I mean, that is something you love to hear, because you would hope that that would translate to the players on the New York Giants roster if we were to hire Bienemy as the head coach. Here's the next quote I wanted to bring up that I read from the same article. I think the biggest thing Coach Bienemy brings to our offense is his intensity, Ware said. If you take a look at his resume and the players he's coached and the way they play football each and every play, they get out there on the field. Having an entire offense with that same mentality is pretty exciting. That was off the mouth of Spencer Ware, who had a bounce-back season under Bienemy as the running back coach with the Kansas City Chiefs, I think in either 2015 or 2016. And in the article, he widely credited Bienemy for his return to success. And here is the next quote. This is about Andy Reid and the play calling. Reid calls the offensive plays while Bienemy helps assemble the playbook and weekly game plans and runs the offensive meetings. He's also the voice in Mahomes' ear through the headset on game days, relaying the play calls. And then finally, there's this. This is Andy Reid talking about Bienemy and his role with the team and, what he thinks of him as a coach. Quarterback is a detailed position, Reid said. It's very easy to go, we can let that one slide. That's not how Bienemy goes about it. He's going to make sure everything is covered. I trust him for that. I can't be there every second. He jumps in and just takes charge. And I have full confidence in him so I can go be the head coach and he can run the offense. He does a heck of a job with it. So the one thing that stands out to me from all those quotes, from everything you've read, when you look at his resume, how he's worked his way up, one, this guy's a hard worker. This guy's going to work his tail off, okay? Two, this guy is attention to detail. You heard it as a player, and now you've heard it as a coach. Not just from Andy Reid, but from former players themselves, Spencer Ware. And like I said, you heard it from people who coached him while he was a player. With special teams, things like that. How he was very diligent, very attention to detail. So, I think that is one thing that a lot of New York Giants fans want. They want a disciplinarian, and with that comes a guy that has a lot of attention to detail. So I think that is the attraction to an Eric Bienemy. Of course, he's an offensive mind. A lot of people want a defensive-minded head coach, but he's not like this quarterback guy, right? He's a guy that's had success with the running backs, and that may be an attraction as well, being that we have Saquon Barkley on this roster. You've seen the success he's had with running backs before, and, obviously we want to run this offense through Barkley. So what this series is about is not even telling you guys who my number one choice is at this point. I mean, you all know I like Matt Rule, and I'll continue to follow him. But in this series, I want to go over some of the strengths of what these guys have to offer. And I think Eric Bienemy is a strong candidate. I think he's a guy that very well may get a head coaching job. Will it be with the New York Giants? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But I think he's a guy that they're going to take seriously. And I think he's a guy that you should take seriously too. Just want to get a video up on it as I did some research into what I liked and disliked about him. In terms of the dislikes about Bienemy, he doesn't call the plays in Kansas City. He's never been a head coach, and a lot of people are going to want to see that, right? He's never been a head coach of a college or pro program. So those are the knocks on him. And he's not a defensive mind. Seems like a lot of people want a defensive-minded head coach. But you can get a strong defensive coordinator. There's certainly some guys out there, and he's youthful, being that he's only 50 years old, and he's had success wherever he's gone. Players have thrived under him. Players have liked playing for him, and coaches have liked coaching him. I think he's a guy that you got to give a chance. Let's see if the New York Giants do, and We'll see if he does become the New York Giants head coach. He's not my favorite. I point to a few other guys that I think are above him, but he is a guy that is a possibility for sure. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.